I feel like especially with art, it's just one of those things that it's like, it's so messy and it's so emotional, and like if you try to cover that up, it's almost like it's...
Yeah, it's not genuine. I do think people respond so much more and relate so much more to the art when they get to know the artist a little bit. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the podcast. I'm Anastasia.
And I'm Cecilia.
And we are the Blank Canvas Podcast. So today we're going to keep things fairly chill and easy. We plan on introducing ourselves, giving a brief background. We're going to talk about what creative projects we're currently working on, what mediums we've been loving, and also make sure to stick around until the end where we've prepared a couple of surprise questions for each other. So that should be interesting. So, Cecilia, we've been art friends for almost a year now.
Yeah.
We have collaborated before, and right. I know about your art these days, but I don't know a whole lot about, like, your whole art background and everything.
So I'm relatively young. I'm 19, so, like, I don't have a whole bunch of experience. But basically, you know, I started art as, like, any child would, as, like, somewhat of an escape and everything. And then in middle school, I kind of, like, got recognized for my talent. So I was like, all right, you know, I like this. And I got Artist of the Year 8th grade, which was, like, a big ordeal. So that was really exciting. And then from there, you know, I just started taking art very seriously in high school. Was it junior year? I worked at this art gallery. Basically, I helped teach classes and worked in, like, an art professional setting, which was really cool. And then, you know, I've gotten a few awards here and there, and, like, just a bunch of different art experiences. Like, I've done a chalk competition, like, just some random stuff here and there. And then right now I'm currently working on getting my associates at a community college. And I don't know whether, like, I want to go into graphic design or, like, communicative arts, which I think they're pretty similar. Ideally, I want to do freelance someday. But, yeah, that's kind of a very, like, general overview of my, like, background or experience in art. So, what's yours?
Yeah, I think it's really cool that we have, like, you are kind of starting this path, but you also have a lot of experience, too. And then I'm kind of in a different place, so we have, like, I don't know, we have different perspectives that I think it'll be interesting to see, like, both of our sides of different topics and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
As for me, I grew up in upstate New York, and my mom was an artist, so I was always doing art when I was a kid, but it didn't really seem, like, special. Like, it was just kind of normal because she did art, so I did it too, and I kind of thought everyone did that. But then around, like, middle school, I sort of realized that I had a bit more talent than most of the other kids, so that gave me more confidence, and it did kind of become my identity. And then in high school, I really started taking it seriously, especially because there were some other students that were talented too, so there was some, like, healthy competition and inspiration. Yeah. And this is before, like, Instagram was even a thing. So the only other young artists that I knew were the people, like, in my very same class and stuff. But it was still a really cool experience. Like, we were a close-knit little group of art friends and stuff. And I was, like, hardcore, I want to go to art school. And I went to a pre-college course, like, over the summer. It was, like, a kind of a long one. At the School of Visual Arts in New York City. So I, like, got my own dorm in New York City and, like, completely lived the life of an art school student for the summer, and I loved it so much. But
that sounds like a dream.
It was amazing. It was so fun, and I learned a lot because it was like basically just a summer course. So we were in class, like, 6 hours every day, and then had a bunch of homework and stuff. But it was amazing. But just that little thing was, just that one course was so expensive, and talking to the other students there, I didn't feel confident that I would be able to afford all of that, and then I would be able to even get a job afterwards. It seemed like a lot of the people there, it was kind of a luxury. Like, they were there because they came from, like, pretty wealthy families and stuff. And my mom, she was so supportive. She was, like, excited for me to go to art school, but I kind of didn't want to burden her with that debt. So I applied, I made a portfolio and all that stuff, and I got accepted, but I ended up not going, and I also went to community college at the beginning. And that was fine. And then part of me always wanted to go to art school, but then I moved across the country from New York to Utah. I actually went to the University of Utah for anthropology and psychology, and I, like, completely just got a Bachelor's of Science degree, which is totally different. And then I was really glad that I got that education instead, because I felt like it was, I don't know, it kind of grounded me, and it also inspired me with art stuff too. So now I feel like I'm making up for lost time, like, not going to art school. I don't so much miss, like, not having the instruction, but I feel like art school is more than anything, it's just the time. You're given the time that you need to work on stuff. And I didn't have that. So now I feel like I'm kind of making that a reality. I'm, like, carving out that time, and I'm way more driven now than I ever was, because I'm not just, like, riding on my talent from when I was young. I'm, like, way humbled now because, you know, now there's Instagram and everything, so you can see, like, who is out there and what they're doing.
Amazing 16-year-olds. Like,
I know. Yeah, there's people out there who are, like, getting the lay of the land before they're, you know, like, barely into high school, and I'm, like, I feel like I'm behind, but I'm also also really grateful for my experiences, because I think that they're so different from a lot of other people's in the art community that it gives me a unique perspective too. Yeah. So I'm grateful for that too. So yeah.
I think it's really cool that, like, I don't know, I see so many adults that did art when they were younger and they just completely swore it off. Like, I know so many people with that same story, you know? Yeah. And I think the fact that, like, you went back to it and that, like, you're just so committed, and, like, I mean, you already had a great talent, so, you know, obviously that helps to motivate you, but, like, I was just, like, so impressed when we first started talking. I was like, wow, she, like, hadn't done a lot of art before, and now she's, like, making, like, these beautiful pieces of art all the time, so that was really cool to, like, see that growth and that kind of new development of you. It was cool.
Yeah, like, I was that person for a couple years who was like, yeah, I used to be an artist, you know?
Right.
And every time I would say that, it felt, like, really bad.
It's just, like, a little piece of your heart breaks off.
Yeah, it felt terrible. And I usually wouldn't even really tell people that, because it's, like, it doesn't really come up naturally in conversation. To be like, oh, by the way, you should know, I used to be an artist.
I used to be something special. Like, yeah. Let me tell you.
I mean, not even that I consider myself to be special for being an artist now. It's just, it's hard to bring it up in conversation. But then when it is so much a part of your identity, you want to be able to tell people and talk about it, but if you're not creating anything, you can't really
you're just like, here's something from a few years ago, like, I don't even remember what it's about, but
exactly. And I do feel like there's so many people who get off track with that, and because I'm, like, so close to that feeling, because it was fairly recent for me, like, just 2 or 3 years ago, that I, like, hadn't created anything in years, I feel like I kind of know the pitfalls and, like, the mindset that people get into, so I want to be able to help pull others out of that too, if I can, because I feel like there are so many people like that I think people build it up too much, and it's like, just chill out and just create something. It doesn't have to be, like, a masterpiece.
Yeah, or just even that whole, like, I'm not talented enough. Like I was saying, like, there's so many adults, like, even my mom, and, like, they're like, oh, you know, I had an art teacher. There's always that, I had an art teacher that was, like, really rude. I'm like, man, you just gotta create art for you, you know?
Yeah, there's always a story of someone who, like, hurt you, like, someone who said something or like your parents weren't supportive, or there's always something that turns people off. And it's so funny how like fragile like the creative the creative identity is, or something. It is so fragile, because just like if you just don't have any support, or if someone says something negative, it can just completely throw you off of that for years, or maybe forever. And that's really, really sad, because even if, you know, you don't have to necessarily make money from art even, or have it be your career. You can have your regular career and just do art because you love to do it. And actually that's like, in a way, that's like the most pure version of art. So and you can do it at your own pace. It's not a big deal. So like if you can get out of your own way and just start creating, then it'll snowball and you'll get more and more inspired, and it's great. And it's helped me a lot, like just with my like mental state and everything, and just and personal identity. Like I said, like you just don't feel right when you are an artist and you do identify that way, but you're not creating anything. It doesn't feel right. So
it doesn't feel authentic.
No, it's weird. And I think it's slightly different for everyone, but for sure, if you are that type of person, then you need to find a way to make it okay for yourself to just create and be okay with what you're creating.
Definitely. And then this is like a bit of a tangent, but if we're going there, you know, I know so many people that don't have like their niche, you know, like they just I'm like, what do you do with your free time? Like, I'm not trying to like take a hit at those people or anything, but I'm just like I know exactly what I can do with my free, like, not always, like, you know, when I'm not feeling inspired or whatever, but I always have that, like, thing to fill up the extra space. And I feel like everyone needs that thing, whether it's, like, cooking or dancing. And even if you're, like, you know, 60 and you're just, I don't know, like, you could always pick up a pencil, and that could be your thing, you know? And I think it's important to have that
totally
thing.
Especially, you know, in today's world, I think we all need something to do that's a little more hands-on, like to decompress from life and stuff, whether it's like knitting or gardening or
seriously, or
if it's more physical, like dancing or even working out. I mean, some people, I think just going to the gym kind of becomes that thing for them, and that's great.
That needs to be my thing sometimes.
I know, right? I'm like, why couldn't I have gotten that one?
Right.
Yeah, so I've actually been seeing a lot of people on Instagram that were kind of that same story of, I used to be an artist and now I'm getting back into it. And I think it's really great that so many people are inspired, but I want to like help encourage people a little bit more, because I'm so close to that feeling. Like I said, it was like so recent for me that I feel like I want to help people and help inspire people, or just give praise or encouragement or whatever. So I think that's kind of a good spot for the podcast to fit in, and people can listen while they're drawing or sketching or painting, or if they just want like a little motivation and just feel like they're sitting with their art friends or whatever, even though none of us like have time to go do stuff anymore. Like, does anyone have friends anymore? I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Like half a friend. Like
everyone's so busy. We all have like our main hustle and our side hustle, and then our like personal project side hustle.
Yeah, seriously. Especially like if you're an artist, like. I'm literally entangled in like 500 different things.
I know. And then like no matter what you're working on, once it becomes work, then it becomes work. Even if it is like your personal project, once you're like into it is a project. And then there's this other part of your mind that's like, oh, I'm inspired by this other thing. And then that becomes like, oh, I wish I just had time to do my art. But it's like, wait, I'm doing art right now.
Right.
Yeah. At least that's how it is for me. But I think that's probably good. Anyway. Tangent, but so I just hope that this podcast can just be a fun little chill conversation to put on while people are working on their own creative projects, and just have a little bit of background chatting about art topics.
Yeah, definitely. did you want to get into our, like, your favorite mediums right now and your pieces that you're working on right now?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right.
For me, my favorite medium is probably oil paint, even though I haven't even been using it all that long. I feel like everything I've been working on has, like, been leading up to it, and now that I'm using it, I'm like, yes, this is what I wanted it to be, and I love it so much. It's just really versatile, and it's actually really forgiving. And a close second to oil paint is probably gouache. I love gouache paint also. And actually, it's in the way that you paint with it, it's pretty similar to oil paint because of the way it blends and stuff.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, like, probably anyone could tell. Obviously, like, I like acrylic because a majority of my pieces are acrylic, but that's just because, like, when I envision something, I know I can do it easily in acrylic, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But honestly, I like to, like, my old art teacher calls me a sponge because I really like to try every single medium, you know? Like, I just think it's important as an artist because, like, you know, there's, if you are a painter and you don't really draw, there's something that you can learn from your drawing to put into your painting. So I think, like, every medium is good, but yeah, obviously,
yeah, 100%.
I like doing acrylic. Yeah,
definitely trying new mediums, even if it's not gonna be the one you stick with. You bring something back to your regular medium, like you learn something from it that can improve everything you do.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that you, like, we've kind of talked about this, about how you, like, are finding this new love in oil, and that's, like, the one medium. Like, I definitely have done, like, some oil paintings, and it's not that I dislike it, but I'm so impatient that, like, I don't know, it takes so long for me to do an oil painting.
Yeah. It takes a long time to dry. And then people who have trouble with acrylic, I think their main thing is that it dries too fast.
Yeah.
So
I have never had that problem. Well, like, I kind of do, but I literally, like, water down my acrylics so much to the point where sometimes even for detail work, they're like watercolor. So I think that helps a little, but...
Yeah, that makes sense because that's usually not how I use it. I'm usually trying to blend, like, really thick acrylic, and it's like drying. Yeah, it's like drying on the brush. I'm like barely done mixing the color, and yeah, so
yeah,
I'm too slow.
Yeah, I've actually seen, like, some YouTubers that I watch that, like, you know, they're pretty what's the word? I don't know, just talented and, you know, versatile in their mediums and stuff, but maybe they've never used acrylic before. Like, primarily a lot of them use, like, Copic markers and stuff. And they're like, well, you're not really supposed to mix, like, acrylic with water. And I'm just sitting there like, no, put water in, like I don't know, that's not, like, of course there's no right way to do anything, but I'm just like, it helps you so much, like.
Yeah, you can definitely mix it with water.
Yeah.
I have heard, like, if it's just completely watered down, it can have trouble adhering to the surface and, like, crack off after a few years or something. But
geez.
I think as long as you're putting more acrylic on top of it, like, it needs to have, like, the color pigments and the acrylic molecules or whatever need to stay bonded and stuff like that. So I think no matter what you do, even if it was, like, super watered down, if you put, like, acrylic matte medium or gloss medium over the top of it, I think that would actually solve that. I'm not sure. But
yeah,
I've only heard of it. I've never had that happen to me or anything. So yeah, we'll see.
Right. My paintings, my oldest acrylic paintings are, like, only 5 years old. So I'm just like, whoa. And I literally use, like, Walmart cheap craft paint, so I'm just like, let's see how these look in, like, 20 years. Like,
those little Walmart ones in, like, it's almost like a little bottle.
Yeah, the apple barrel.
Yeah, like with the round top. A lot of times they're, like, really matte, and they remind me of, like, acrylic gouache or something. And I kind of like how it looks. Like, for sketchbooks too, like, if I just want to cover a sketchbook page, I like that cheap acrylic that's, like, super chalky and matte, because it actually has like that gouache look that people love, that's like super flat and matte.
Yeah, it definitely has a nice appeal to it. I've actually, like, never worked with, like, high professional acrylic paint. Like, I've literally never, like, I don't think I would have too big of an issue with it or anything, but I've just never, I actually asked for Christmas for, like, a nice set, so we'll see how that goes, but.
Yeah, I think you might have to adjust to how strong the color is, because it is more pigmented. And I recently, because acrylic has never been my main medium, but I fairly recently got, like, some nice acrylic paints, and they really are a lot more pigmented. But, you know, when you're, like, if you're painting a skin tone or something, you don't need a lot of pigment. Like, you want it to be a very muted color. So
Right.
sometimes that's not necessarily what you want. Like, I think some people get a little hyper focused on, like, I need it to be like the brightest, purest blue, just so that they can, like, water it down because they need it to be like a sky color or something. So
Right.
like, you don't always need a huge pigment load. Like, you can just use, like, muted colors and it can turn out great until, you know, you might just need, like, a little accent or something. But yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about some of your works in progresses?
Yeah, so I just finished Inktober. I was doing, like, ballpoint pen, kind of surreal portrait sort of things.
Yeah,
and I
those
was
were
like,
so good.
Thank you. I was obsessed with that while I was doing it, and then the second it was over, I was like, on to the next. So
you're like, absolutely none of this, no more.
Yeah, it was good, and I felt like it leveled me up a little bit with, like, drawing and judging values and stuff. But now I'm like, okay, let's apply all that to painting, like, now.
Right.
So I've been doing, like, studies in oil to kind of just get the feel for it again. Just, like, portrait studies from pictures online, like stock photos or whatever, just to get the feel for it. And I'm also doing, like, a little bit of a sketchbook series on dinosaurs right now too.
Yes.
I'm in an art collective
good.
on Instagram called the Sketchbook Society, and we're doing, like, all dinosaur themed stuff for December. So I'm taking that opportunity to not really do, like, finished pieces of dinosaurs, but just, like, totally nerd out on dinosaur sketches, and it's so fun. And, like, I just love working in a sketchbook sometimes, especially if I haven't done it for a while, because it's just so low pressure.
Yeah.
And then kind of future stuff is, I kind of want to do stuff similar to what I did for Inktober, but in oil and with, like, really cool color combinations and stuff. So I'm kind of in progress working on thumbnails and color comps and stuff like that for those types of projects.
Heck yeah. I'm excited to see them.
And what about for you? What are you working on?
Well, so like I kind of said, I always have, like, a list of, like, 5 million things that are just, like, random thoughts. Like,
yeah, totally. I relate to that.
So, like, I've been doing, like, custom sketchbooks where I don't know, I just, it's kind of weird because they're just, like, ideas that I don't even know how I get the inspiration from, and sometimes they're not, like, super cool or anything, but just, like, kind of weird surreal paintings and sketchbooks, and I hope to, like, sell those and stuff, and maybe, like, start, like, a branding thing with that. And then, you know, I'm kind of in the works of, like, some surrealistic paintings. I actually did one recently in oil, and I have yet to, like, post it or anything.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it's
I was
pretty
about to
much
say, I don't know about this.
Yeah, I'll send you, it's, like, pretty much done. I'll send you a picture of it. It's basically, like, a fist, like a hand in a lake or an ocean, and then it has a little bit of the background of, like, the islands or whatever, and then it has antlers coming from the hands, which, like, sounds really weird, but, like, compositionally it looks pretty cool. But
yeah, I love stuff like that. I mean, just, like, mash up any, like, 2 or 3 elements from nature,
right,
and, like, make a cool composition out of it, and I'm sold.
yeah, especially, like, I always was one of those kids that liked to draw portraits. Like, you know, I feel like most artists don't well, maybe they do start off drawing portraits, but they don't like them, or like they feel obligated to. But I like, that was the one thing I love to draw, and so like human anatomy is just like such a, not even a comfort, but it's just like I feel good when I make pieces with human anatomy, just because I think they're so like, I like really weird art, you know, just like out there.
Yeah, I'm actually totally the same way. My number one subject is just people. Like, I love drawing and painting people, whether it's the figure or just like a head portrait, you know, head and shoulders or whatever. But because like, I think as people, it's natural for us to be interested in other people and just find them intriguing. So yeah, and also I feel like a lot of times, like online, people are the most interested in artwork that's about people.
Oh yeah, especially like celebrities. It kind of like, this is kind of a love-hate thing with me, but like there's always that tip that you can like rack up a lot of following by doing like celebrities, and like in your heart you're like, this isn't what I want to do, but like, you know, like it can get you followers and stuff. So there's always that debate like in my head.
I also have mixed feelings on this because I actually use photos of celebrities a lot to just practice painting or drawing.
Right.
Mainly just because there's lots of photos of them. Like,
that's true.
If you like someone's face and the picture you're looking at, you don't like the lighting, you can just, if they're a celebrity, you can just search their name, find all different kinds of lighting with that one face that you really like the features of, and,
that's true,
use that. So I actually do that a lot, but then I don't necessarily want it to be like a likeness of them, but if you're already doing them, then you kind of have to, because like if you posted it and didn't say it was supposed to be them, and then someone was like, oh, I can tell that this was that person.
Someone will get salty and call you out.
Right, so it's sort of this like double-edged sword. And then also sometimes, celebrity is, or an actor or a musician, they just are an interesting character, so they have that that character and that quality that is inspiring. Like, there are a lot of musicians that I'm like, oh, I just know that you're like a creative genius, and you also have like have like a crazy nose, so like I really want to paint you. So but I don't really want to be one of those people that does the celebrity portraits. Not that I'm against that at all, but I do think it can probably get people stuck in that, like...
Yeah, it just, like, to me, and of course if you do this and you love it, like, that's totally cool and everything, but, like, sometimes I'll go to those pages and they have thousands of followers, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, but it sometimes it just feels so artificial, you know what I mean? Like...
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't feel like it developed, like, definitely there's some style to some of them and everything, but for the most part it's just like, well, most people, like, really anyone can get stuck in that rut of just doing realism, especially if it's easy for you and everything, I definitely have gotten in that rut.
It definitely goes beyond just the celebrity portraits, but just doing realistic stuff in general, because people always respond to it. Like, people who don't know much about art, they're very impressed by like realism.
Another podcast for it, because I just like, man, I've always had that debate where I'm just like, do I create art that like I know I spent a lot of time on and has a lot of meaning, or do I get the art that feels like mechanical work for me but I know it'll get a good response, and it's a whole
I think there's like something in between that everyone kind of falls in, like that there's a little niche for everyone somewhere on that spectrum. But for me, I'm always kind of swinging back and forth, and I haven't found that balance 100% yet.
I don't think anyone has.
Also we're always changing and evolving, so our place on that spectrum, if it's even a spectrum, is always moving too. So sometimes you can really get your head like into a complete tailspin, like trying to think about this stuff, and then it's like, okay, let me just create something instead of like intellectualizing it too much or something. But for me, the way I've been kind of solving that lately is I'm just trying to admit to myself, like, okay, my favorite thing to draw or paint is like people, possibly people and animals or something. Okay, so let's narrow it down to that somewhat.
Yeah.
And then I'd like there to be some like abstract elements, like, I don't know, kind of like brushstrokes sort of more towards the edges of the composition or something. But
Right.
I really like to get a lot of detail like in the eyes and stuff like that. So for me, I think like having the focal point be a little more tight and more rendered out and everything more realistic, but then kind of having the figure fade into just more loose brushstrokes. That's like the look that I'm trying to cultivate, and like that's what it feels natural for me to do, but I still am like finding my rhythm with it too. So
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. Like, I mean, I don't know if you have this belief entirely, but like when I do a piece that is maybe a bit more like funky or abstract, and it maybe took just as long as some of my really realistic stuff, I always feel like not as proud of it, even though maybe it is more interesting to me or has more emotional connection. But like I always am more excited to show off a piece that like has a lot of detail and like is just super real, you know? I don't know.
yeah, I think I can relate to that, even though that detailed one might not like mean as much to you.
Yeah,
you just know that people are going to like it, so that's nice, of course.
Right.
But yeah, I think if you can create something that means a lot to you and it's you know, it feels like it's your own style and everything, and people respond to it, then that is like
The
the
sweet
best
spot.
Yeah, like I think that's amazing. Doesn't always happen.
Right.
And I'm trying to think if that's even really happened for me. I don't know. Like, I think a couple times I've gotten a good response on something that also meant a lot to me. Yeah, I think a couple of the Inktober pieces I just did actually were like that. So that was good.
Yeah, those were definitely the sweet spot that we were talking about.
Yeah, I was... Of course, I wish I could just, like, keep doing that, but now I'm like, okay, on to the next thing. Let's do something that I'm completely not proficient in. Like, the second I get confident in something, I want to, like, do something harder.
On. Yeah, I think that is so important as, like, I don't know, for me, I mean, obviously I've done a lot of those, like, surrealistic acrylic paintings, and that was, like, my concentration in AP art. If people aren't aware of that, it's just, like, the class you take senior year, and you have to make, like, a collection of work that has a common theme. And so I made those paintings, but yeah, I really like them, and, like, they get a good response and everything, but, like, I don't ever want to be that artist that, like, you go to their website or their portfolio and it's like, oh, they can do this and that's it. Like, you know, I want to be very, like, being able to do a lot of different stuff. And
yeah,
you know.
I'm the same way, and it really is a struggle because I'm so driven. I'm driven to move on to the next thing and on to the next thing, and that's what I'm excited about. But in terms of, like, you know, your Instagram page or your website or whatever, to have it all look cohesive, it feels like it's something you're supposed to do. But if you don't have that cohesiveness to all your work, then it's hard to do that. And I'm always struggling with that. Like, I don't necessarily want one style. I don't like, some people are always asking, like, how do I find my style? I don't necessarily want to find one style, but I do want my page to look good. So
yeah, I think we've, like, talked about that before, but that's seriously one of my biggest struggles or problems of trying to, like, get somewhere in social media. It's just like, man, I want to post stuff that I do every day that feels authentic. And then, but, like, literally, if you look at my page, it's like, oh, surrealistic painting, like, super realistic, and then some weird comic, and then, you know what I mean? And it's like, I know I'm not gonna, like, because the number one tip for social media is, like, be very cohesive, like you were saying, you know, have a common theme. And I'm just like, well, then I'll only be posting, like, once a month, like. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's been the common tip, and that is what makes things look super professional.
I can't.
But I keep hearing lately that now we're moving into kind of a new era of social media where being authentic is more important. I keep hearing people say that.
Really?
But
like in what context? Just their social media page?
Just in general, like, you know, that it's more important to be authentic because people more and more are turned off by people like having too much of a cultivated look or like too much of a curated.
I love that idea and like I support it, but that's not like what I see yet, but like I will pray for that. But
yeah, I keep hearing people talk about it like, oh well, these days the most important thing is to be authentic, and I'm like, really?
Well, send them our way, because
right.
me and you are pretty authentic.
I mean, it sounds great, and I have heard it like on other podcasts and stuff like that, but yeah, it's not necessarily what I see, but hopefully we will see that in the future. And I love making like my Instagram page look like it's all going together, and sometimes I'll like do that for a little while, and then I'm like, nope, gotta switch it all up.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's
just like, it feels boring to me, and I don't know. There's something I like about that artist that like shows their I don't know, I value an artist that shows their mistakes, and I absolutely love seeing the roughest drafts of paintings end up being beautiful, you know what I mean? Like, if you just show, especially like you were talking about people being unmotivated and just not wanting to create art, I think especially in like the age of social media, when you just see perfect pieces of art, it's like, wow, they did not. They have like 100 sketches and they studied anatomy for, you know what I mean? And people don't see that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's
it's
a huge problem.
True. Well, yeah, I mean, artists that I follow, when they show their rough sketches, that's what I love the most, because it actually, as a fellow artist, it can help me more to like have a peek into their process and see like, oh, okay, so this is kind of how they plan this out or do this or whatever, or like, oh, this is the order of steps they take, and it's helpful and it's interesting and it helps me like get to know them as a person, and so all of those things are great.
Oh yeah.
So I totally get that whole, you know, like I want to see people being authentic, but when you see which, you know, Instagram pages are the most popular, it doesn't necessarily seem like that's reflecting that yet.
Oh, it makes me so, like, I don't want to say angry, because, you know, I'm happy for everyone's success, but I'm just like, you're not, like, it's almost like you're not leading a good message to your followers. Like, it's almost like, you know, you're just saying I'm perfect right away, and that's like, I'm sure that's not what they're intending to do, obviously.
Yeah, but that brings up an interesting point, because do any of us have a responsibility to show that or not? I don't know. I mean, I think it's important to you and I that we show that a little bit, at least, because we want people to see like the person behind it and everything, and that's what we value in others. But is that necessarily a responsibility of artists or not? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's very like, I always get objective and subjective confused, but it's one of those like where it's just very controversial. Like, I don't know. I don't know, like, I made, like, a video talking about my art supplies, and, like, I got comments saying, oh my god, it's so dirty, and, like, why didn't you clean stuff? And then, like, multiple people were like, hey, you know, she's being authentic, and, like, I was like, yes, like, thank you, I'm not gonna clean my stuff so, like, it makes it look like I don't use it, or, you know what I mean? It's just, like...
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I think being authentic... I think it's very polarizing, because as soon as you say something that's a little bit embarrassing maybe, or just kind of pull back the curtain a little bit more than other people are doing, two things happen. Like, some people jump in and judge you, and some other people just like love you so much more for it. So I think it really divides people a lot into those groups. But the cool thing is, those people that judge you, they were never going to be like your people anyway. So good riddance, you know?
But like, we were going back to like the perfect accounts, like when it comes to mind of like the perfect accounts, it's like, what do you think their fan base is? To me, from like what I've gathered, it almost seems like really maybe younger kids that are just starting out, and I feel like that's like the worst kind of account to look at when you're, you know,
that's true.
Like, some of them, and it's just like these young people, and they're like, oh, you know, I gotta be like that right away, and I feel like especially with art, it's just one of those things that it's like, it's so messy and it's so emotional, and like if you try to cover that up, it's almost like it's, I don't know, it's like,
yeah, it's not
ruining
genuine.
the art, but yeah, it's just like,
I do think people respond so much more and relate so much more to the art when they get to know the artist a little bit. And that's another topic we could probably have a whole episode on.
yeah,
You know, some artists want to be completely separated from their art, like they want to be almost anonymous, but
yeah,
to me, and you know, and like let the art speak for itself, which I get that in theory, and sometimes I feel that way.
It's a nice idea, but
sometimes I don't want to talk about what something is about because it just doesn't quite feel right, or it feels too personal or something. So,
or
yes,
you want it to be open for interpretation.
Absolutely. So I do understand that. Sometimes defining it limits the interpretation.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, I think your hand shows in what you do no matter what. So if you can just be a little bit more honest about it, then it's going to feel better for you, and it's going to feel better for the viewer, the follower, or whatever, and they'll get to know you better and just be more invested in what you're doing, which if you want to connect with people, that's important. And if you want to make a business, that's also important. So that's the way I see it for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely, like, you know, I've done some research on, like, selling art and all that, and I definitely found a common theme that, like, either you want the viewer to relate to the piece and, like, feel really emotional about it, whether you tell them your story or not, or on the flip side, you want them to know your story so they can invest in it and feel, you know what I mean, like they can, they personally have a connection with it. So I've heard that it's really good, especially like in a gallery scene or something, to like talk about what this piece means to you and, you know, how you put your blood, sweat, and tears and everything into it. Or
right. And I think people who are other artists really appreciate that. And then people who aren't artists, that's so interesting to them. Like, they want to know that stuff. They really, I think it's really fascinating to people who don't create art. Like, where do you get these ideas? Or like, why did you choose this or that? I think that's the stuff that they want to know.
Yeah,
so
it's like the magic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes you don't want to reveal everything. You want to have some of it be open, like you said. And and I do feel like totally, you know, explaining every little thing does limit the meaning because it's like defining it, pinning it down to one thing instead of having room for people to kind of fill in their own emotions and their own experiences. But I don't know. I don't think it should be completely cut out. I don't think the artist should be completely cut out of the art.
Yeah,
personally.
definitely.
But I mean, there are people out there who, I mean, if that feels right to them, then that's fine, you know?
Yeah. I just like, I don't know what piece we were looking at. It was something about, it was a piece created during the surrealism movement, and it was basically like these two children on like a staircase or something, and there was a sunflower. I know this is super vague, but anyways, the artists left it up for interpretation, and like I personally find that more interesting because you can find your own story within it, whereas like if an artist, you know, this shirt color means this and blah blah blah, it's where's the imagination and the fun? Where's my story in it, you know? Like, you have to connect with art on a personal level.
That is a really good point. And that reminds me, I've heard two artists recently kind of talk about something similar. One is Skeletori on Instagram. I'll link her page or whatever somewhere whenever we get this up. But she had a video fairly recently where she was talking about sometimes just a certain facial expression or pose or combination of subjects or something, it has like a feeling for her, but she doesn't necessarily have like a meaning. So she likes to be in a state of creating with feeling, but not necessarily with meaning. And then later she might look at it and figure out what the meaning is or decide what it is, or maybe think, oh, I think that this actually came from this part of my brain or whatever.
Yeah.
Or the viewer can do that.
Right. That's really interesting that you bring that up because, sorry to interrupt, but like when I create pieces, like, especially with the weird surrealism, it's just, like, when I first went to make that idea, like, I absolutely had no, oh, this means that she's sensitive and soft, blah, blah, blah. But as I developed the piece, I kind of, like, think of what it could mean, and maybe that has some, what's the word? You know, it affects my painting some way because I start to think about that meaning. But initially, like, I always feel super weird as an artist going into a painting and be like, I don't really know what this means, but...
Yeah, usually I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I kind of have an idea, but then another part of me is like, I feel like I should put this here, and I don't necessarily know why, but I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah,
so.
And I think, like, I think this with everything, but especially art, there's some subconscious thing. You know, someone could say, oh, I'm just putting that there because it looks good, but there's probably some part of your brain that, you know, kind of deciphered why it should be there or what it means, you know?
Right, and also, I mean, you could get really technical with this, but why do things look good to us as humans? Like, there's some part of it that it looks good for a reason because it appeals to a certain part of our brain, and maybe that part of our brain also gives it a different meaning. So, yeah, it all kind of ties in. Like, when people talk about something just looking good and it doesn't have meaning, it's like, well, looking good is meaning. Like,
yeah, definitely.
That's meaning in itself, and that's a whole other debate. All right, so we've touched on like at least 10 extremely polarizing debates in art.
Yeah, those could all be like separate little episodes or whatever.
Right.
Like we could expand on them.
Right.
Sometime.
And then, only because I just mentioned earlier that there were 2 artists I was thinking of. The other one was Miriam Tilson, and she was also sort of saying a similar thing, that she comes up with also kind of surreal imagery, and she'll just create it, and it has a very emotional feeling to it, but she doesn't try to impose a meaning on it, and then later she might realize what the meaning is for her, or she might not ever realize the meaning for herself, but let people interpret it. And it's just it's the feeling that matters. And I totally agree with that. But I think we should move on to our secret questions for each other so we can get wrapped up a little bit.
Yeah.
So do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I don't know, like, how in-depth your questions are, so hopefully mine don't look, like, super silly. But mine is, like, especially this somewhat caters to you since, you know, you had such a break in art. So when was your worst, like, I don't know if this is actually related, but maybe. When was your worst art block, and how did you get through it? And then maybe to tie in with that, like, what inspires you to get out of that, or, you know.
Yeah, well, my worst art block was probably just the period that I wasn't creating anything. And actually, it's kind of interesting. This is, like, super important to me, but I've never talked about it on my YouTube channel or anything. But I was getting into, like, planning and motivational stuff online, like bullet journaling and, you know, that kind of stuff. And right. People would, you know, how the whole, like, aesthetic of, like, oh, look at how pretty my journal is or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, people are making things look really pretty, and it's very simple little doodles. And I'm thinking, I could just doodle in my journal or whatever, and I know I can draw that easily. So I started doing that, but then I started making it more and more complex, and then it's like, okay, maybe I'll just do a drawing, maybe I'll just do a painting. And then
That's awesome.
I stumbled across a few YouTube channels that really inspired me. One was Palest Blue, and she was interesting because she does, like, journaling and planning and stuff, but she also does, like, fine art. So that was, like, a bridge. And then also Minnie Small, I think, like, everyone watches her. Then I found her channel, like, right after that, and she was doing, like, her sketchbook series at the time, and I, like, something totally clicked, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start creating art all the time now. And it completely pulled me back, and I was like, okay, I have to draw for at least an hour every single day or I'll die.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's awesome. That's such like a inspiring story.
Yeah. So I would say for anyone else in that kind of position where maybe you haven't drawn anything in years, I would say just start doodling. Start doing something simple, like, and don't think of it as a drawing. Don't think of it as like
a chore
as like art, but think like, okay, I'm gonna just draw a flower on the side of my journal or something. Just decorate things, and then you'll think, oh, I want to make that a little bit more complex and a little bit more, and just take little baby steps. Because why would you be able to just jump back into like 100% masterpiece if you haven't created anything in years? Like, of course you gotta ease yourself back in.
Yeah. I think, like, we were kind of talking about that briefly, but just people, like, especially even me, I put so much pressure on myself. Oh, man, I haven't done, like, a legit painting in a while, so I can't do anything because I don't want to start that painting, but, like, no, it's okay. You can, you can go in your sketchbook or,
Yeah, and during that time that I wasn't creating, I would have ideas all the time, like, as if I was still creating every day. I would have...
I kind of thought that would go away a little bit.
No, like, for me, having ideas of what to do is never a problem, personally. Like, I have too many ideas. So I would still get these ideas, and then each one, it would be almost painful to think, like, I am not, like, in a place where I can actually put that down on paper and have it look good. So it's like, okay, I guess I won't do anything at all. And
I think... like... Do you think it had a tie-in with, like, mental health or anything like that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But also I think it's just not being in the habit of doing it. You're not warmed up. And then any idea you do have, you're having that idea...
It's intimidating. And
because it's, like... Because it has a lot of meaning for you, so you don't want to ruin it. When you're in the habit... Yeah, when you're in the habit of creating all the time, then having an idea, it's just like, okay, cool, I'll just draw that really quick. It's not a big deal because you're drawing all the time. So, yeah, I think the first step is just start drawing all the time. And, of course, that's what everyone says, but don't make anything need to be like art, or even don't even put it in a sketchbook. Just put it on a scrap of paper or on lined paper that already looks terrible anyway, so like you're not gonna ruin it. Just whatever. Right. And then once you start doing it, like in the process of doing it, you're gonna get other ideas, and you're gonna want to put that on nicer paper, and before you know it, like gallery. You're making art. Right.
Yeah.
Gallery.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, like, just to add a little extension to that, it's interesting you're saying, like, with the ideas you don't want to put time into it or whatever. Like, I have these ideas, and I think a lot of artists do this, but they're like, oh, I can't waste this on just a doodle. It's got to be and it's such a bad, like, habit, I guess, because it's like you'll always have ideas and you can always revisit that idea. I always feel like I can't, like, remake paintings. Like, I feel like it's
totally,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm actually just now kind of starting to get over that, but I completely relate. I'm just now realizing, like, okay, if I have that idea, just make it, and then I can see what I like and don't like, and then I can make it better. And the next time you do it, it's going to be way better because you already kind of worked out the kinks of it. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so my question for you is, do you have a favorite artist, like an old master or an artist that's no longer living that really inspires you? And if you don't, then do you have a living one that you would like to substitute?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I'll do, like, a tiny bit for living and dead. Okay. So this is, like, super cliche, but recently I've been really into Leonardo da Vinci, and I think what I have a connection with him, I guess, I mean, obviously I don't know him or nothing, but is that he didn't want to just do, like, just paintings of the royal family, everything like that. He wanted to do engineering, and he wanted to learn more about the world. Like, I have this division in my life because I really like math and I'm really good at it, and, I like English and stuff. And somewhat throughout my life, there's like, do I do art or do I do this? And it's never really been that big of a question. I was always like, yeah, I'm going to do art. But Leonardo da Vinci just kind of like, obviously it was a different time and everything, but he did it all, and he's just really inspiring because he didn't just want to paint this, he wanted to figure out how it worked and why it worked and every angle of it, and he's just a really interesting dude in general. Like, he kept these notebooks, obviously most people know about him, but like there's some really interesting quotes. And also I was watching this documentary, and I'm such a big believer in the idea that a sketchbook shouldn't be this like beautiful masterpiece after masterpiece. It should just be your thoughts and I call it your second brain. And that's kind of
totally.
like, yeah, and that's like kind of what his books were. Like the documentary said, he had his laundry list and who needed to pay him, and I just love that, like he had these books to like just put his mind into, and I just love that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like we see it as something so sacred that he's putting down these sketches that are so polished, but then also if he has like his bills or whatever right next to it, it's like it almost makes everything in life sacred to treat it all the same. Yeah. Like, you're making everything have the same importance, which also, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. I think we could probably do, like, a whole episode on that, too.
Yeah, definitely.
But I love the answer because, I went to school for science, and then I love art, so I'm, like, always kind of trying to mesh the two together in my brain.
Right. And then really quickly for the living artist, there's just one artist, and he's on Instagram, and I haven't been following him for like that long, but it's Miles_art, and we'll link that in the bottom.
Yes, I love him. He is one of my biggest inspirations.
Like, part of me, I think this is with everyone, but you just get so ticked, you're like, how the heck is he that good in his ideas and blah, blah, but then the other part of me is like, you need some competition, and it's not like I am lacking competition, but you need some motivation in your life to be like, I aspire to be that good, or I look up, you know what I mean? You need something that's like makes you want to go to the next level. So
totally. And he is just so technically proficient, but his ideas are just completely out of this world, and he's awesome. Yeah, he's a huge inspiration. He's amazing.
So I think it's my turn to ask you a question. So I don't know how abstract this one will get, but it's basically like, what are your thoughts while making art? Where does your mind go?
I don't know.
Or maybe like, I don't know. Like, for me, like, sometimes I'll just zone off, so I don't know if you have like a certain path you'll go down, or...
Yeah, in psychology, you might have heard there's something called the flow state, which means that your brain is like kind of just on autopilot, but in a good way, and it's when you're just completely immersed in what you're doing, so you're not necessarily like having thoughts. It's almost like a meditation where you're just kind of doing what you're doing, and that's like everything there is, and there might be some thoughts, but it's all very like peaceful and efficient, and then like hours slip by and you don't even know what happened. Is there a medium that you haven't tried that you really want to try?
I have recently gotten into some 3D work, sculpture, and so I have touched on it a little, but I'm just really, really excited because I don't want to like limit myself to 2D art, and I think it's important to learn the form, and so I'm really excited to be learning about how the light affects this bumper, so I'm excited to work more in sculpture and 3D and everything. I think there's a lot to learn even for 2D artists.
Yeah, that's definitely going to help you understand form a lot better for drawing and painting too.
Yeah, definitely.
Any last thoughts that you have, Cecilia?
Not really, just that, like you said, we want it to be something that, a podcast that's comfortable for everyone to listen to, not just professionals or not just beginners, just, everyone. So, yeah, leave topics that you think would be cool to any creative mind, I suppose.
Thank you, and until next time, this has been the Blank Canvas podcast with me, Anastasia.
And Cecilia.
Thank you so much for listening, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.